I'm Johanna Lehne. I'm a Senior Policy Advisor working at climate change think tank E3G, and we're a partner of the Energy Shifts project. For the next few minutes, I'm going to be talking to you about practical insights policymakers can gain from better integrating social sciences and humanities into their decision-making processes. We're heading into a really busy year for EU energy policy making. The legislative pipeline is packed with energy files. These are being revisited in the context of increased climate ambition. And each of these files, each of the decisions being taken around these files is going to have profound impacts on the lives of Europeans, from the ways people heat their homes, to the ways they move around, to their jobs. And so we know that social knowledge is going to be crucial to delivering the energy transition. That's including when it comes to public participation, but also in terms of ensuring that the outcomes of those decisions are truly socially just. This is why it is key for policymakers to consider social sciences and humanities evidence in their decision-making processes. But what does this mean in practice? What happens when policymakers truly engage with social sciences and humanities expertise? How does this affect their policymaking processes? As part of the Energy Shifts project, we ran a fellowship program that's brought together academics from different social sciences and humanities disciplines with policymakers at the cutting edge of European energy policymaking. And at the end of this policy fellowship, the fellows, the policy workers that is, reported 3 key shifts in their thinking and approach. They reported 1, being able to better relate policy dilemmas to the larger shifts in thinking around the energy transition. So it got them beyond business as usual thinking. They found themselves questioning certain concepts that they've always taken for granted, for example, energy poverty. The second key element they pointed to was their ability to see complexities. So suddenly seeing the energy transition embedded in complex social systems. So the fact that energy poverty, for example, is multidimensional, and that aspect, that ability to see additional complexities opened up a richer array of possible policy options for them. The third key element, the outcome that they reported, was that they were able to better evaluate issues of social justice throughout the energy transition. So thinking of social justice as a factor that needed to be really embedded in all of their decisions to do with the energy transition, and not just as an add-on at the end to do with citizen participation and acceptance, thinking about how do we actually make this policy that we've already come up with acceptable to citizens. In addition to those outcomes, they also reported gaining 5 practical insights. Number 1, they talked about contextual sensitivity. So really understanding that cultural, historic, geographic, local conditions have to be taken into account when implementing energy policies, and that it wasn't sufficient just to think about financial incentives in this context. The second practical insight was this idea that actually the policymakers needed to let go of social acceptance as an outcome for the policy in question. So instead of focusing on simply ensuring it would be accepted, they thought much more about ensuring that there was a good process under which the policy making was conducted, and in which the context in which that policy would play out was actually being acknowledged. The third practical insight was the importance of physical proximity of the policymakers to the people affected by the policy. So they considered that a really important factor in terms of the ability of the policymaker to really take in the complexity of the situation. The fourth was the fact that best practice, although very helpful in certain ways, was best used conceptually rather than instrumentally. So really understanding that best practices may be helpful in terms of understanding how something worked in a given context, but that didn't necessarily mean that that best practice case could be perfectly transferred to another situation. And finally, number 5, they talked about the importance of a more comprehensive notion of citizen engagement with climate policy. So really building a community of the willing around the energy transition, really seeing public engagement with energy issues being arranged from the beginning of the policy making process and not just added on at the end. While all of these insights were great, and the policymakers who took part in the fellowship really emphasised that aspect, it's also worth noting the everyday realities of policymaking that might come into conflict with integrating these insights. Policymakers face all sorts of stresses on their time. It can be hard to bear these lessons in mind. In that context, you're welcome to come and revisit these and remind yourself of why it might be helpful to take social sciences and humanities into account. Thank you for taking the time to watch this.